Well, I'm making this video under unfortunate circumstances. First of all, I'd like to say my thoughts and prayers are with everyone involved in the aviation accident and all the first responders, all the people that are working out there day and night in the conditions that they are. I had lots of people reach out to me because they know that I'm a fixed wing pilot, a helicopter pilot, and asking me all these questions, which I enjoy talking about that, but not really under these circumstances. So, and you know, my wife Christina asking me all these questions: why can't people survive this crash, or do you think anybody survived? So, you know, some of those thoughts come to people's minds, and I guess, you know, they want to ask someone that knows a little bit about it. I know a little bit about it, and that's about it. So everything that I'm going to talk about will be just my opinion. This is not an expert opinion for sure, but this is how much I know about it. I may make mistakes through my analyzing things, but it's just my opinion, okay? First thing is that comes to my mind is typically when we transition across an airport, we overfly the midfield or middle of the field. And for that purpose, it avoids the landing and taking off traffic. If you will, create a V, here's the airfield, you cross midfield. Now, there are all kinds of exceptions to those rules, which in this case, it's a military helicopter, an H-60, which is more widely known as a Black Hawk helicopter. They, from what I've gathered from some friends of mine, have told me they have a corridor that they travel, and it has a certain altitude assigned to it. Supposedly, this is all secondhand information. So that altitude was 200-foot AGL. Now, this helicopter, some of the preliminary reports, I don't know exactly, but show that helicopter was at 400 feet outside of the range of that corridor that they usually cross through. That makes sense to me because 200 feet, he's not in the way of the air traffic. With a CRJ 700 regional jet operated, it was being operated for American Airlines. So, you know, the other thing about it is I heard that the helicopter pilots had NVGs on, which are night vision instrument, you know, goggles, which I'm NVG trained. My helicopter had NVG cockpit, but when you're in and around an airport in that condition, typically don't wear them. And what it does is it basically night vision. You could see everything at night. Things look, you know, a little bit different or whatnot. It does, I think, restrict your view slightly. But some of the other questions are, you know, how come they couldn't see each other? How come, you know, you would think looking out the window, but watching the video, the helicopter transitioned for a long time from the left to the right. And you could see the aircraft on final for quite some time. It's hard to tell the angles, but it appears that the angles could be, you know, skewed coming together. They're both traveling, it looked like at a reasonable speed. You know, the plane's coming in at 160, 150, 140, getting down to approach speed. And this helicopter is probably traveling at 100 to 120 knots coming this direction. So they may not have seen each other. Obviously, they didn't see each other. But some of the reasons why they didn't see each other is basically the direction of route. And there's a lot going on. There's lights everywhere. There's other aircraft in the air. They're talking to controller. They may have things going on in the cockpit that are occupying, you know, what they're doing. Maybe they were looking for something. It's just unknown how this accident could happen. But one thing we do know is, you know, these are both newer aircraft, are equipped with traffic collision avoidance, TCAS systems that operate. There's also transponder systems called ADS-B, which preliminary reports are that the helicopter did not have ADS-B turned on. And I don't know a lot about the military regs, but they did not have ADSB on. So I don't know if that's for sure that somebody reported that, but that could make it a little bit more difficult for Tower to know exactly where they're at. Of course, they have them on radar, and the radar goes around and puts a blip on the screen, and so they're watching their route of travel. They see the aircraft coming in. They see that's going to be a conflict, so they're talking to both. Typically, since the aircraft's on final, maybe they're not warning the CRJ about pending traffic. Typically, you tell both pilots to be looking for the traffic. Since they were on short final and the helicopter was approaching from the other way, maybe they didn't tell the CRJ. They were just making sure the helicopter had the traffic in sight and passed behind them, which is typically a normal thing to do. Yes, okay, I see them. They're going by, or they're going at an angle, or whatever it might be. And you keep what's called visual separation between that other aircraft or whatever it might be and possibly another helicopter. So he was trying to confirm that. It sounded like in the transcripts that Tower was trying to confirm that he had the RJ in sight, and you could hear his concern was elevated, probably because the route of travel. And so most likely, this is just Greg's opinion, the Blackhawk pilots probably had the other RJ or the other aircraft, whatever that was. It probably could have been a regional jet as well, that was in the videos that we've all seen taking off. So I'm guessing that those guys were looking at that thinking that's what the tower's talking about. That's an assumption and it's a long shot, but I thought that they did confirm that they had the traffic, but obviously they didn't have the traffic that was concerning. The blame is you play the blame game. Obviously the CRJ was in the right. They were coming in to land. They did everything they were supposed to do. Obviously their screens probably going crazy inside the cockpit. But here's one thing I skipped over about the traffic collision avoidance. So it's like when you're in close proximity, you almost ignore all these warnings, which doesn't make any sense. But think of it as when you're parking your car and the thing's dinging and beeping, and you're like, I see the wall right there. I can see it. You think that's what it's talking about, but it's actually talking about something else that's maybe behind you can't see. So what I'm saying is that you've got all these aircraft within this small condensed area around airports, right? Well, it's your traffic collision avoidance is going off constantly. Traffic, because all these aircraft are potential hazards because you're within this proximity of them. So it's almost, in my opinion, here again, it's almost like it doesn't really work for that. And there needs to be a better a way. And now I'm talking from my avionics, my machines I've had behind me. They've had simple TCAS on them. And potentially there's way better technology out there, and they may have been equipped with it. But they should be able to interpolate the direction of travel and give a more severe alert that versus just watch out, there's other aircraft around you within the sphere of where you're at, the same space. Now, you could be going opposite directions. It's still going to warn you that there's traffic in case you decide to make a turn. So, I think there could be potentially in the future better methods to see these folks. And there's lights everywhere. It's at night. There's towers, there's aircraft, there's beacons on the airport. There's your lights you see flash. Typically, weather is always a factor when it comes to these aviation accidents. And this particular weather was clear, 10 miles visibility. It was obviously cold, but obviously there was no weather, was not to blame or not an issue, hindering the guys from seeing other aircraft. And talk about, can you survive an accident like this? If you really think about the speeds of these machines they're going, this thing's going 140 miles an hour. That's really fast. And yes, it's going into water, which we all think is soft, but at 140 miles an hour, the water is not soft. And I don't know if you've ever watched hydro racing, boats crashing at 100 plus, 110, 120. They break up and go into pieces. So to hit something at 140 or 50 miles an hour, it is going to be catastrophic. On top of the Black Hawk probably severed the fuselage, it hit it at 120 miles an hour. So think about you sitting in your car and getting hit by something at 100 miles an hour or 60 miles an hour. The likelihood of someone surviving that is very low. We did have really high hopes in the beginning when they said they were pulling people from the water, the rescue. And talk about the rescue people, first responders, all those people. They were there so fast, but unfortunately, they're to my knowledge, to this point, there wasn't any survivors that I've heard of. Now, certainly, we were hoping that there would be. And, there were folks that we knew. In fact, one of the flight attendants was on an American flight out of Charlotte. We were 99% sure one of our last flights in the last few weeks. And lots of people lost friends and loved ones and everything. But this is a tragic, very tragic incident. And, procedurally, the air traffic control should have, recommended a turn, obviously. It's easy to Monday morning quarterback, but they should have offered a turn to the helicopter when they recognized that, but maybe they felt like he was just going to pass behind them. There's a thing called wake turbulence as well. So, you're not going to pass behind an aircraft that close to it with it making a wake turbulence behind it. Even if you're in a Black Hawk helicopter, I'm not doing that. Wake turbulence is similar to a boat going through the water, but you just can't see it in the air. And we caution people, or air traffic control will, for wake turbulence, especially big jumbo jets and things like that, it will roll over other aircraft because of the turbulent air and the way it's being swirled up and things like that. So you have to be very cautious of that. For that helicopter to cross that close would be, it would not be normal in these conditions. So there's lots of unknown answers out there, but there are mistakes made, unfortunately, and there'll be, it hurts all of us because there's new regulations that come out for operating around airports and separation, which needs to happen. But unfortunately, this situation is just it's devastating for everybody.